Tonight, we're going to drift out across a stretch of ocean that has inspired wonder, fear, and endless speculation. A place sailors and pilots once whispered about, and writers turned into legend. The Bermuda Triangle. It isn't marked on any official map. There are no borders you can see, no signs that warn you as you enter. And yet, for decades, stories have surrounded this corner of the Atlantic. Ships vanishing without a trace. Aeroplanes never reaching their destinations. Compass needles spinning as if confused. Some say it's all myth. Some point to science, to weather, to human error. Others prefer the mystery, imagining ancient forces, hidden portals, or something we still cannot explain. The truth is softer than the legends, but no less fascinating. The Bermuda Triangle is as much about the human mind as it is about the sea. About why we crave mysteries, and why the unknown feels so magnetic. So let's set sail together, slowly, gently. Not to solve the Bermuda Triangle once and for all, but to sit with it. To listen to its history, its science, its stories, as if we were floating quietly on calm waters, with nothing to do but wonder. The Bermuda Triangle is not officially recognized by any government or scientific body, and yet it has become one of the most famous stretches of water in the world. Roughly speaking, it covers the Atlantic Ocean between 3 points: Miami, in Florida, San Juan, in Puerto Rico, and the island of Bermuda, which lies about 1,000 kilometers or 640 miles off the American coast. Together, these locations form a loose triangle, though the shape is more symbolic than exact. Sail into this region and you will find nothing visibly unusual. Blue ocean, skies that shift from serene to stormy, and trade winds that have carried ships for centuries. And yet, this ordinary patch of sea has gathered a reputation as extraordinary. The legend of the Bermuda Triangle is largely a modern one. The phrase itself was first coined in 1964 by a writer named Vincent Gaddis. In a magazine article, and later in his book Invisible Horizons, True Mysteries of the Sea, he described a string of strange disappearances within this triangular region. He painted a picture of an area where navigation failed, compasses misbehaved, and vessels could vanish without warning. But even before Gaddis gave it a name, scattered stories of losses in this region had circulated for decades. Perhaps the most famous of these is the story of Flight 19. On the afternoon of December 5, 1945, 5 U.S. Navy Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for a routine training mission. Their leader was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a seasoned pilot. The exercise was meant to be simple. Fly east, practice a bombing run, then turn north, and finally head back west toward base. But soon after they began, Taylor radioed in that his compasses were not working properly. He seemed disoriented, unsure of whether they were over the Florida Keys or the Bahamas. Radio operators tried to guide them back, but Taylor's confusion grew. The weather worsened. Communication became garbled. The last messages described the sea looking strange, as if they were lost in a haze. Then silence. All 5 aircraft disappeared. No trace was ever found, not of planes nor the 14 crewmen on board. To make matters stranger, a rescue plane sent to search for them also vanished, with 13 more men. Official explanations mentioned poor weather, navigational error, and limited fuel. Yet the story of Flight 19 became the perfect seed for the myth. Experienced pilots, functioning aircraft, clear radio contact, and then nothing. The legend deepened when older cases were pulled into the narrative. One of the most haunting was the USS Cyclops, a massive Navy cargo ship in World War I. In March 1918, she departed Barbados for Baltimore, carrying a cargo of manganese ore and nearly 300 people. Somewhere along the route, she vanished. No distress call. No wreckage. Not a single survivor. To this day, the fate of the Cyclops remains one of the largest non-combat losses in U.S. naval history. Investigators have suggested the heavy load of ore may have shifted, causing the ship to capsize, or that structural problems weakened her hull. But because the ocean never returned a body, the mystery lingered. Another often cited case is that of the Marine Sulphur Queen, a tanker carrying molten sulfur that disappeared in 1963. The ship left Texas bound for Virginia with 39 men on board. Somewhere near the Florida Straits, radio contact was lost. Debris and life preservers were later found, but no crew. Investigators concluded the vessel was likely unsafe. Sulfur is highly flammable, and the tanker may have been structurally unsound. Still, the fact that an entire ship and crew could vanish into the sea fed the image of a triangle of doom. As more stories surfaced, patterns seemed to form. A yacht called the Witchcraft, for example, which disappeared in 1967 less than a mile from Miami after calling for assistance. The case of a British bomber, the Tudor 1 Vith, in 1948, which disappeared near Bermuda with 31 people on board. The Star Tiger and Star Ariel, two other passenger planes, lost in 1948 and 1949. In each case, the details varied. Bad weather, possible mechanical failure, overloading. Yet taken together, they wove a tapestry of mystery. Enough for writers and journalists to suggest something larger was at work, an invisible force, an unsolved puzzle of the seas. The media played a powerful role in shaping this mystery. In the 1950s and 60s, popular magazines like Argosy and Fate ran articles about the triangle, presenting it as a place where science faltered and legends thrived. Then came the books. In 1974, Charles Berlitz published The Bermuda Triangle, a bestseller that introduced the mystery to millions. Berlitz was already known for writing about Atlantis and the paranormal, and he leaned heavily into the supernatural angle. He suggested the triangle might be a doorway to another dimension, or the remnants of lost Atlantis technology. His book sold more than 20 million copies, translated into dozens of languages, and cemented the triangle in popular imagination. Hollywood, too, found the triangle irresistible. Documentaries, television specials, and later, films in the 70s and 80s amplified its aura. Headlines spoke of the Devil's Triangle, a cursed sea. Airplane pilots told stories of compasses spinning wildly. Survivors spoke of sudden fogs, glowing waters, and eerie silences. The mystery was no longer just in the ships and planes that were lost, but in the feelings people reported. Disorientation, confusion, the sense of being swallowed by the sea itself. But perhaps the most important ingredient in the legend of the Bermuda Triangle is human psychology. Humans are naturally drawn to mysteries. When a ship sinks in a storm, the tragedy is sad, but it is comprehensible. When a vessel disappears without leaving a trace, the mind hungers for explanations. Our brains are wired to find patterns, even where none exist. And so, when a cluster of disappearances occurred in roughly the same patch of ocean, people saw not coincidence, but conspiracy of nature. It also matters that the Atlantic Ocean, especially near the Caribbean and the Gulf Stream, is one of the busiest and most dangerous stretches of water in the world. Thousands of ships and planes cross it every year. Statistically, accidents will occur, and some of those accidents will be dramatic. But the stories that survive are not always the most common ones. They are the most mysterious, the ones that lack closure. They are the stories that can be retold at night, with the lights low, when the line between science and myth feels thinner. Legends also thrive on exaggeration. Some cases attributed to the Bermuda Triangle were later revealed to have occurred outside its boundaries. Others were explained by mechanical failure or poor weather, but the explanations were ignored in favor of the mystery. The myth persisted because the story was more compelling than the truth. And once it was printed in books, repeated on television, and whispered in bars and classrooms, the Bermuda Triangle became more than a place on the map. It became an idea, one that seemed to confirm humanity's suspicion that the world still held dark, unknowable corners. Even the geography of the triangle plays a role in its allure. The Caribbean Sea and surrounding Atlantic waters are beautiful, tropical, almost dreamlike. The contrast between postcard beaches and tales of vanishing ships only deepens the drama. The same turquoise waters where vacationers sip cocktails are, in the myth, waters that might conceal secrets from time immemorial. We imagine an ocean floor littered with lost planes, an underwater graveyard hidden beneath the waves. In truth, most of these disappearances likely have mundane causes. But in myth they take on a life of their own. To the imagination, Flight 19 did not simply get lost in bad weather, it was swallowed by a portal. The Cyclops did not capsize under a heavy load, it vanished into another world. The Marine Sulphur Queen did not explode, it was taken by the triangle itself. Rational explanations are fragile in the face of the human love for mystery. This is what makes the Bermuda Triangle so enduring. It is less about facts and more about feelings. It is about that moment when the compass needle shakes, when radio static cuts through the air, when clouds roll in faster than expected. It is about how quickly the familiar can become strange on the open ocean. For sailors and pilots, the sea and sky have always been places of awe and fear. To imagine that there are still regions where they hold power over us is, in some way, comforting. It reminds us that the world is still vast, still mysterious, still bigger than our explanations. And so the Bermuda Triangle entered culture not as a danger zone marked by the Navy, but as a symbol of the unknown. It became shorthand for things we cannot explain. In the same way that Atlantis symbolizes a lost golden age, or UFOs symbolize contact with the beyond, the Bermuda Triangle symbolizes the idea that our maps are not complete, and that somewhere out there, nature still has the upper hand. When you strip away the legends, the Bermuda Triangle becomes not a supernatural void, but a fascinating case study in oceanography, meteorology, and human psychology. The sea in this region is not empty or silent, it is alive with currents, storms, and forces that can challenge even the most experienced navigator. The scientific story of the Bermuda Triangle begins not with mystery, but with the environment itself. The first and perhaps most important factor is weather. The Caribbean and Western Atlantic are prone to sudden, violent storms. Warm tropical waters fuel hurricanes, which can form quickly and sweep across the region with devastating power. Even outside of hurricane season, smaller squalls appear with little warning. A cloudless sky can darken in minutes. Sailors who once relied on stars for guidance would suddenly find themselves blinded by rain, battered by winds, and tossed by waves that seemed to rise from nowhere. In the age before radar and satellites, such storms could swallow ships without leaving a trace. Wreckage was often scattered or sunk, and without modern communication, the outside world might never know what had happened. Closely tied to weather is the Gulf Stream, one of the strongest ocean currents on Earth. Flowing like a great river within the sea, it surges northward along the coast of Florida, carrying warm water from the tropics toward Europe. Its current can reach speeds of nearly 5 miles per hour, or about 8 kilometers per hour. To a swimmer, that may not sound like much. But to a drifting vessel or a sinking plane, it can mean the difference between a trace of wreckage being found and nothing ever appearing. The Gulf Stream can disperse debris across vast distances in a short time. A life raft, a piece of wing, or a wooden crate may be carried hundreds of miles away from where it fell, making search and rescue nearly impossible. To an observer, this disappearance feels sudden and mysterious, but to the ocean, it is simply movement. Another factor often cited in Bermuda Triangle lore is magnetism. Many stories mention compasses spinning out of control, pilots reporting that their instruments seemed unreliable, or ships claiming they could not set a course. This has been linked to the idea of magnetic anomalies, strange areas where Earth's magnetic field behaves unusually. In fact, Earth does have regions where true north and magnetic north align, meaning compasses point more directly than usual. One of these zones lies near the Bermuda Triangle. Navigators unfamiliar with the difference between true and magnetic bearings may have miscalculated, steering themselves off course without realizing it. Over time, stories of compass failure became exaggerated into legends of magnetic chaos. Modern studies, however, have found no unique anomalies in the triangle. Compasses may behave slightly differently, but not unpredictably. The mystery lies more in human misunderstanding than in the field itself. Some explanations reach beneath the waves. Scientists studying the seafloor have noted the presence of methane hydrates, deposits of gas trapped in ice-like structures within sediments. Under the right conditions, these hydrates can destabilize, releasing vast amounts of methane bubbles into the water. Laboratory experiments have shown that when enough gas is released, it can reduce the density of water, causing ships to lose buoyancy and sink rapidly. The idea of a tanker or vessel suddenly swallowed by a frothing sea of bubbles is dramatic, and it fits the narrative of sudden vanishing. However, evidence for large-scale hydrate eruptions in the Bermuda Triangle remains scarce. Such events are rare and localized. While theoretically possible, they are unlikely to account for the majority of disappearances. Still, the theory illustrates how complex and unpredictable the ocean floor can be. Then there is the human element. The Bermuda Triangle sits along some of the busiest shipping lanes and flight paths in the world. Cargo ships, cruise liners, fishing boats, military craft, commercial planes, all cross through this corridor between North America, South America, and Europe. With so much traffic, accidents are statistically inevitable. A small percentage of thousands of voyages each year will end in trouble. But because the triangle already has a reputation, every accident within its borders becomes fuel for the myth. Pronta. It is a classic case of confirmation bias. We remember the losses in the triangle, but not the countless successful journeys that pass through it daily. Human error itself plays a significant role. Navigating in the mid-20th century, even with instruments, was not foolproof. Pilots could misread compasses, misjudge distances, or misinterpret landmarks. Sailors could miscalculate positions in rough weather. Radios, especially in the 1940s and 50s, were prone to interference and static, leading to confused or incomplete transmissions. Many of the mysterious last messages attributed to triangle disappearances can be explained by such technical limits. We can't see land. Everything looks strange, may not indicate supernatural fog, but rather exhausted pilots flying low on fuel over an unfamiliar horizon. In other cases, mechanical failure, engines stalling, hulls weakened by corrosion, fuel mismanagement, provided silent but natural explanations. Scientific investigations have repeatedly examined the triangle's reputation. In the 1970s, the US Coast Guard published reports pointing out that the number of accidents in the triangle was no higher than in any other heavily traveled region. Lloyd's of London, one of the largest maritime insurers in the world, reached a similar conclusion. Shipping insurance rates were no higher in the triangle than elsewhere. If the sea there were truly cursed, the numbers would show it. They do not. More recently, in 2013, the Worldwide Fund for Nature compiled a list of the 10 most dangerous waters for shipping, and the Bermuda Triangle was not among them. The real danger zones were in regions with narrow passages, icebergs, or heavy piracy, such as the South China Sea and the Mediterranean. Yet despite this evidence, the myth persists. Why? Part of the answer lies in how our brains process risk. When science says, "There is nothing unusual here," the statement feels unsatisfying. We crave stories with edges, with puzzles. A plane that runs out of fuel is tragic, but it does not capture the imagination like a plane that vanishes into thin air. The absence of explanation becomes its own explanation. The void fills itself with speculation. Was it aliens? Time warps? Lost Atlantis technology? The wilder the theory, the more attention it receives. And with every retelling, the Bermuda Triangle grows more legendary. It also helps that the triangle has just enough uncertainty to feed belief. Storms do form quickly there. Currents are strong. Compasses do need adjustment. Ships and planes have vanished, and sometimes no wreckage is found. Each of these facts is grounded in reality, but when blended, they create a canvas upon which imagination paints freely. The boundary between science and legend is not a wall, it is a fog bank through which both light and shadow drift. Even modern technology has not entirely erased the mystery. Satellites track storms, GPS guides planes with precision, and communication networks are global. Yet accidents still happen. In 2015, the cargo ship El Faro, sailing from Florida to Puerto Rico, sank in a hurricane within the Triangle, taking 33 lives. Investigations concluded the crew sailed too close to the storm. It was human decision, not paranormal interference. But because it occurred within the boundaries of the Triangle, headlines linked it to the old myth. The legend proved resilient, attaching itself even to the tragedies of the present. Some scientists suggest that the Bermuda Triangle endures because it is not really about the ocean at all, it is about us. It is about our relationship with uncertainty. The ocean has always been a place of awe and fear, an expanse that resists human control. When we tell stories about it, we are really telling stories about our own limits. We cannot command storms. We cannot command currents. Sometimes we cannot even command ourselves. And in those moments of weakness, the sea reminds us of its power. Viewed this way, the Bermuda Triangle is less a curse and more a mirror. It reflects our need to explain the unexplainable, our willingness to weave myth into fact, and our quiet recognition that science cannot eliminate mystery. It can only illuminate it. For every rational explanation, there remains a sliver of doubt, a place where imagination can slip in. That sliver is what keeps the triangle alive in culture, long after the data should have put it to rest. The scientific explanations, storms, currents, magnetic variation, human error, mechanical failure, do not diminish the fascination of the Bermuda Triangle. If anything, they enhance it. To think of how powerful a storm can be, to imagine the Gulf Stream carrying a fragment of wreckage across oceans, to realize how fragile a ship or plane can be in the face of natural forces, these are humbling thoughts. The Bermuda Triangle is mysterious not because it defies science, but because it embodies it. It is a place where the raw elements of nature combine to remind us of our smallness. And yet, the legend continues. Because the Bermuda Triangle is not only a geographical location, it is a cultural one, a story told and retold, a shorthand for mystery, a place where science and imagination meet. And that brings us to another layer of the triangle. How it became woven into our books, our films, and our shared mythology. The Bermuda Triangle may not appear on official nautical charts, but it has carved a deep place in the map of human imagination. If Part 1 gave us the legend, and Part 2 gave us the science, then what remains is something softer, more elusive. The way this triangle of water has seeped into culture. It is here, in the world of books, films, television, and even music, that the mystery found its most fertile soil. When Vincent Gaddis first introduced the phrase Bermuda Triangle in 1964, he could hardly have predicted the cultural phenomenon it would ignite. His article in Argosy magazine described a series of disappearances in this patch of ocean and suggested there was something unnatural about them. By itself, the piece was little more than speculative journalism. But timing is everything. The 1960s were an era of growing interest in the unknown. UFO sightings were climbing, the space race stirred the imagination, and paranormal topics were making their way into popular conversation. The Bermuda Triangle fit neatly into that atmosphere. The real explosion came with Charles Berlitz's 1974 book, The Bermuda Triangle. Berlitz was already well known for his fascination with Atlantis and ancient mysteries, and he wove the triangle into a tapestry of supernatural speculation. In his version, disappearances were not merely accidents but clues. Hints of alien intervention, dimensional rifts, or advanced technology from a lost civilization. He wrote with conviction, mixing fact with conjecture in a way that blurred the line between reporting and storytelling. Readers were captivated. The book became an international bestseller, translated into multiple languages, selling more than 20 million copies. For many, Berlitz was their first introduction to the triangle, and his ideas cemented it as one of the great mysteries of the modern world. Soon, television joined in. In 1976, a documentary called The Bermuda Triangle aired, combining dramatic reenactments, interviews, and ominous narration. Its tone was one of foreboding, suggesting that this region of the Atlantic was not merely dangerous but cursed. Other shows followed, each adding layers of mystery. Glowing fogs, ghost ships, distorted time, vacati. The more they speculated, the more the public leaned in. A mystery that could have been explained away by statistics instead became one of the most famous, unsolved enigmas of the century. The triangle entered fiction too. Novelists began to use it as a setting, a backdrop for tales of horror or adventure. In 1977, Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind included a scene where Flight 19, long thought lost, reappeared intact in the desert, a direct nod to the legend. The message was clear. Perhaps these vanishings were not tragedies at sea, but abductions by something beyond Earth. Science fiction embraced the triangle as a natural extension of its themes: portals, wormholes, and the thin veil between dimensions. By the 1980s, the Bermuda Triangle had become a household term. Children's books, comic strips, and even cartoons referenced it casually. It became a cultural shorthand for place of unexplained disappearance. A shipwreck? Must be the triangle. A plane lost? The triangle again. Even when the real location didn't fit, the name was used. The triangle had become more symbol than geography. Music, too, found inspiration. In 1981, Barry Manilow released a song simply titled Bermuda Triangle, turning the legend into a metaphor for love and loss. Other artists, from rock bands to electronic musicians, dropped references to the mysterious sea. Each mention reinforced the idea that the Bermuda Triangle was not just a place, but a cultural touchstone, a shared code for the inexplicable. This cultural momentum built on itself. The more the triangle was referenced, the more firmly it became lodged in public consciousness. School children heard about it in playground conversations. Magazines featured it alongside UFOs and Bigfoot. For many, it was their first brush with the idea that the world still held secrets, a thrilling notion in an age of growing technology. But beyond media, the Bermuda Triangle took root because it spoke to something deeper: our need for mystery. As science explained more and more of the natural world, the unknown retreated. Diseases were cured, planets were photographed, atoms were split. Yet within us remains a hunger for the unexplained. The Bermuda Triangle offered a space where modern knowledge seemed to falter, where the sea reminded us that it could still withhold answers. In this way, the triangle became a kind of modern mythology. Ancient cultures told of sea monsters, whirlpools, or gods who swallowed ships. Sailors spoke of the kraken, of mermaids, of cursed waters. The Bermuda Triangle continued that tradition, giving the modern world its own maritime myth. It was not a dragon that pulled vessels down, but something equally mysterious. Distortions in time, alien ships, forces beyond comprehension. The names changed, but the feeling was the same. Some even connected the triangle to older myths, particularly Atlantis. Charles Berlitz was one of the strongest proponents of this link, suggesting that remnants of Atlantean technology might lie beneath the waves, interfering with navigation. Others speculated about crystal energy, underwater pyramids, or ancient curses. These ideas may sound fantastical, but they resonated because they gave shape to the formless. The sea is vast, and imagination rushes to fill its gaps. Philosophically, the triangle serves as a metaphor for the limits of control. Human beings like to believe the world is mapped, measured, and mastered. The Bermuda Triangle whispers otherwise. It suggests that there are still places where order collapses, where the map is incomplete. Even if science insists that accidents there are no more frequent than anywhere else, the idea of a forbidden zone persists. It is not about statistics, it is about psychology. That psychology is reinforced by the very nature of disappearance. When people die in storms or crashes, we mourn, but we can find closure. When people vanish without trace, our minds circle endlessly. What happened? Where did they go? Why was nothing found? The absence of evidence becomes evidence of something larger. We project fears and hopes into that blank space. In literature, This is called negative space, the power of what is not shown. The Bermuda Triangle is one vast negative space, an ocean of unanswered questions. It also reveals how myth evolves in the modern age. In earlier centuries, seafarers might tell of ghostly lights or sea serpents. In the 20th century, the language shifted to aliens, portals, and dimensional rifts. The myth adapts to the culture around it. It borrows the imagery of each era. Today, one might even hear whispers about black holes or simulation glitches. The Bermuda Triangle becomes a canvas onto which every generation paints its anxieties and fascinations. Pop culture, of course, amplifies this. In the 1990s and 2000s, television channels dedicated to mystery and exploration, the History Channel, Discovery, National Geographic, returned to the Triangle repeatedly. Each special asked the same question: what is really happening in the Bermuda Triangle? Each presented theories, from methane gas to alien abductions, often leaving the answer open-ended. Viewers were left with the thrill of unresolved possibility. Even today, the Triangle appears in video games, podcasts, and YouTube channels. For gamers, it is a perfect setting. A place of danger, uncertainty, and hidden truths. For storytellers, it is a shorthand for mystery. And for the casual listener or viewer, it remains a reminder that not everything has been explained. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of the Bermuda Triangle in culture is how it teaches us about ourselves. The Triangle reflects our relationship with fear, not direct, tangible fear, but a softer, more existential kind. The fear that despite our satellites and science, the world may still surprise us. The fear that we are not fully in control. And paradoxically, the comfort that comes with that fear. If there are still mysteries, then life has not become too predictable. The Bermuda Triangle also mirrors our storytelling instinct. We are narrative creatures, hungry for beginnings, middles, and ends. When the sea swallows without explanation, we write the endings ourselves. Some say aliens took them. Others say they slipped into another dimension. Still others suggest Atlantis pulled them down. The details differ, but the story remains the same. The world is larger than we know. That is why the Triangle continues to appear in new forms. It is not just about ships or planes anymore. It has become a metaphor for any place of mystery. Writers speak of the Bermuda Triangle of relationships, or the Bermuda Triangle of memory. The phrase itself has transcended geography. It has become cultural shorthand for disappearance into the unknown. And so, in the end, the Bermuda Triangle in culture is not about the ocean at all. It is about us. It is about how we turn facts into stories, accidents into myths, and maps into mysteries. The Triangle may not be more dangerous than any other ocean corridor. But it is more powerful in a sense because it occupies the imagination. And imagination, once stirred, is harder to silence than any storm. And so, we leave the waters of the Bermuda Triangle. Not with answers carved in stone, but with a quieter kind of understanding. Ships and planes may vanish in the stories, but what lingers is something else. The reminder that mystery itself is part of being human. We seek it, we shape it, and we carry it with us. Some mysteries invite science, others invite imagination. The Triangle does both. Perhaps that is its real power. Not a curse of the sea, but an invitation to wonder. To remember that even in a world mapped by satellites and measured in data, there are still places where uncertainty drifts like fog. As you rest now, you can let go of the questions. The ocean will keep its secrets. And maybe that's enough. So breathe. Let the waves settle in your mind. Let the stories drift away. You are safe, and the sea is calm.